Madam President, I move an urgency be declared within the meaning of Article 4, Section 19 of the Constitution of Minnesota with respect to House File 2490, and the rules of the Senate be so far suspended to give House File 2490 its second and third reading and place it on final passage.
On that motion, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. House File 2490 will be given its second reading. Is there any discussion on the motion? Senator Stump.
Thank you, Madam President. 2490 is the bonding bill, and my first comment on it was going to be, are there any more projects? But I thought I'd better not ask that. I want to spend just a few minutes describing a little bit of the approach which I mentioned as we took up the discussion before on the Senate bonding bill. There were some kind of guidelines that the Senate had followed, and those were kind of spelled out in 5 different words. One was basically economic development. We tried to look at the bonding proposals in light of how would they move Minnesota forward, how would they help communities expand, how would they create more jobs. And as we traveled around the state, that was definitely one of the important components. Another one was the housing. And as we go through the bill in a few minutes, you'll see that that has been a major part of this bonding proposal. Housing, as we traveled around the state from corner to corner, large cities as well as rural areas, housing was an area that was in great demand. Employers could not hire the people they wanted to hire because there was no housing in their communities. And so you'll see in this proposal a strong emphasis on housing. When we talked to employers as we moved around the state, another thing that popped out quite often, very often, was that they needed to have trained workers. The economy right now is starting to really move forward. Manufacturers, business people, but what these companies need are people who can step in and have the training to run the equipment, to produce the products that these companies are manufacturing. And so higher education really is a component that is working closely to move our economy and Minnesota forward. And you'll also see in this proposal a very strong emphasis on higher education. The fourth one is transportation. And I would like to say that our transportation needs are satisfied in this bill, but I can't. We have to have a strong transportation funding package at some point in the future. But in this proposal, you'll see that a significant amount of state's resources were put into transportation to try to take care of and assist economic development in the communities that needed to move product across the state or to move product from to market. And all of this basically adds up to more jobs across the state, and I think a better future for Minnesota. In the governor's introduction of his bill, he, or the Department of Management and Budget, had information that said that for every $1 billion that the state of Minnesota invests in infrastructure, it creates 28,500 jobs. And so I think that as we look forward to heading home and look forward to a summer that hopefully will be productive, hopefully many of these jobs will be popping up in your communities, whether it's in higher education through asset preservation or in state facilities, and that will add to the economy and help Minnesota continue its growth. So members, what I would like to do is to just describe the different things that you have in front of you. There is a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet reflects both the bonding bill, which is 2490, and it also reflects the cash bill, which is House File 1068. And the reason for those two bills was to try to work in accord with an agreement that leadership on both House and Senate had about a year ago, where they said that they would support roughly $1 billion of GO bonding in a biennium. And if you remember last year, we had a bonding bill of about $156 million. And so this proposal that you see before you, Senate or House File 2490, is $846 million. And to try to accommodate the need, there also is a portion of the bonding package which is really cash to the tune of about $200 million. And that we'll go through in a few minutes. So the spreadsheet reflects both of them. There's a bill summary for both of the bonding bill as well as the cash bill, and then you should have House File 2490, and then as we get to the cash bill, which is the House File 1068. So members, I will try to point out the differences between the Senate proposal that we had, and there are very, very close similarities. We have held fairly close to the proposal that came out of the Senate. There were a couple of changes in the higher ed portion. There were two areas which one was Minnesota West was not funded. What the Senate had done was we went directly down the list that the higher education systems gave us. We on the MnSCU list, Minnesota West and Dakota County were the two that did not receive funding. Otherwise, all of those lists were the same. There was some change. Winona was funded in the House bill significantly higher than the 5.9, but that the 5.9 is what is in this proposal. And that starts a program down there in teacher training, and I believe that adequately addresses the needs that for the next period of time. In education, there was a reduction in the size of the project at Red Lake. Now the project will be the kitchen and the hallway and cafeteria area, rather than, I think the House had a larger number than that, roughly trying to address other components of that project. The Senate proposal went up in trails and trail funding, and you'll notice that in the language, the list of trails that have been spelled out. We also increased in funding the area of RIM, which is under the Board of Soil and Water Resources, and also a little increase in the funding of our local roads and bridges in replacing wetlands for our counties. The agriculture was the same, and the zoological gardens was the same, and I believe administration was the same. And under administration, you'll see the capital, which was funded at the $126,300,000. That fully funds pretty much the project here at the Capitol. Under amateur sports, one change that occurred was the addition of the National Sports Center tournament fields. They're expanding their fields, the number of fields for soccer. So that number went up to, there was an addition of $3.2 million in that area. There was a reduction, a slight reduction in the military affairs, but both projects that were spelled out in the Senate bill are still picked up for funding under the amount that you see under military affairs. And those two projects are Brooklyn Park and also Owatonna. Under public safety, there was a new addition to the list that the Senate had in our bill, and that is the project out at Cottage Grove, and it's actually a project between Cottage Grove and Woodbury, and that was an addition to the public safety area. When we look at transportation, there is a change. What the Senate did in its bill was to spell out or earmark, you could say, some of the large projects that are occurring in the metropolitan area. Those projects were the what we call TCAP, or the replacement of two bridges out by the old Army ammunition site north of St. Paul. And we also spelled out the US Highway 10 and Armstrong Boulevard intersection, and also 77th Street, which is just north of the Mega Mall and right north of the 494. What the House was extremely persistent on was to try to put all of those together under one lump sum of dollars. And so you'll notice that when we left the Senate, we had $40 million for local roads and $40 million for local bridges. Under this proposal that you have before you, we have roughly $33 million in bridges and $54 million, 300 and some thousand dollars for roads. And so there will be, when you analyze it all, there will be a slight reduction in the dollars that go out to local roads in particular. Under transit, the Metropolitan Council, they too, the House had applied kind of the same guidelines in that area, where they, for the Transit Capital Improvement Program, they would list a number of projects and then have one lump sum of money, which is on line 289. What we had done was the same as we did under local roads and bridges. We listed several projects. So the same projects you'll see listed on the spreadsheet are the ones that were in the Senate bill. And so we met with some of the Metropolitan Council people and stressed the importance of these projects that we had in the Senate bill with assurances that they would continue to support those projects and move forward on them. Under early childhood, under human services, there was an increase in the early childhood funding from the Senate's position of $3 million to $6 million. There was some additional language that says that the $3 million of that project would go to a project in Minneapolis for the YMCA, and then the other $3 million would go statewide for one project that would be a $1 million cap, and the rest of the money would be at a $500,000 cap. Pretty much agreement on Veterans Affairs and corrections. Economic development, which was an area that was pretty active and alive right up until late last night. That's the area where a lot of local projects end up. And you will notice that there were some additional projects added to that. Let me just run down there. We had funding for a project in Alexandria that was added. There was some additional or funding for Phase 2 and Phase 4 of Chatfield down in southeastern Minnesota. Cosmos, a municipal center or a community center. We had some addition. Well, I believe on some of them you'll notice that the number is the same, and that was just moving of one of the same project from bonding to cash or from cash to bonding. And so as these things were worked out, sometimes those projects had to be funded by cash or could be funded by GO bonds. So there were some changes there. The Lake Elmo water system, which is a project that is out in Lake Elmo and I believe Oakdale, going in to provide water as a result of the pollution from 3M. The Brian Coyle Center, which is a community center in Minneapolis, was a new project. The Nicollet Mall, as you remember, the Senate's proposal funded the Nicollet Mall at $20 million, and in this proposal, it went up by $1.5 million to $21.5 million. And also, Spirit Mountain up in Duluth ended up receiving some additional funding. One other one that the Senate did not fund but is new in this proposal is the funding of the Palace Theater in St. Paul. And that was funded at roughly $5 million. The Senate had carried $500,000 for the pre-design and design. I believe the Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation Board was the same. Public facilities was the same, except for the Lewis and Clark Water Project. And next to the restoration of the Capitol, I think undertaking to try to find a solution to a multi-county area in southwestern Minnesota that is struggling with not having adequate water was one of the most challenging issues that I think became present in the discussions. And if you remember the Senate's proposal as it came out of the Senate followed the governor's amount. The governor had suggested or requested $20 million in his proposal. The Senate had put in $13 million plus the taking into account that the local Lewis and Clark Water Authority had some resources. I believe that would have compiled $20 million. So as we worked on this issue, we found that the number was inadequate, and that the project, in a sense, changed from where phase one would start and end, became a little larger. And so the end result is that this proposal has $22 million in GO bonds. GO bonds. And the rest of the project under discussion in the tax bill to try to find a solution with local communities, counties, and and cities to how to figure out how to fund the rest of it. The total project cost is about $63 million, and so it becomes a rather large problem, but one that, when we were in southwestern Minnesota, was extremely important to them, and very evident that something had to be done. Housing, as I mentioned earlier, is an area that was emphasized right from the very beginning of this session. The Senate had $80 million in housing. This proposal has $100 million in housing. And if you count the $6 million that is in this proposal for the Dorothy Day Center, which is the homeless shelter, it really has $106 million for housing across the state of Minnesota. So it's a number that is, I believe, the highest that any bonding bill in the state of Minnesota history in terms of size, and so I think it's going to be one of the really bright stars in helping our economic development across the state, helping those who are struggling to afford housing, and also promoting and rehabilitating the housing that we currently have. The History Center is, I believe, about $2 million. Did we come down $2 million on that? History Center? I thought we had 12. Okay, the History Center, I believe, is just a little bit more in terms of, I think, of asset preservation. And then, of course, members, you'll see some cancellations. And so on the last page, if you look at the line 451, you'll see the 846 million. And if you look at the line 452, and that is the debt service, which is for this particular bonding package. And Madam President, I think I would stand for any questions.
Are there any questions? Senator Stump, you did such a nice job. There's no questions. Senator Senjem.
Madam President, maybe everybody's asleep.
Time for questions. Senator Senjem.
Thank you, Madam President. No time for no questions here, but I want to thank Senator Stump for his work. I've been there. These aren't easy. Lots and lots of pressures by lots and lots of members and even non-members, of course, on the development of a bonding bill. And I know Senator Stump's been at this perhaps 6 to 8 months at this point, and frankly, maybe even going back as far as last year. So, Senator Stump, thank you for your work. You're just ultimately fair. You're cordial. You're always welcoming, and I think every member in this body, irrespective of what they might think about bonding, will tell you that Senator Leroy Stump is a good and decent person and puts a lot of effort into his work. Lots of good things, and depends on your scope and view of things. Maybe some things that maybe you wouldn't agree with, but in many cases bonding is frankly in the eyes of the beholder in terms of the value of specific projects. But certainly I think for all of us, if we had maybe one project in this bill that we'd all frankly support, it's the final, well, hopefully final payment into the restoration of the state capitol. I think we can probably generally say that we would all agree on that. And Senator Stump, beyond that, in the area of asset preservation, I think and again, I understand the pressures on asset preservation. It's always that little slush fund that people want to draw to and draw that down. But I think you generally stood strong, and we've got a good amount of asset preservation money in there, whether it's for the state colleges and universities, the University of Minnesota. I know they all want more, but or whether or not it's any of our agencies. But I think you certainly did a good job there. Transportation, $88 million. That's a fair amount of money in a bonding bill for transportation. I think, again, you stood strong, and we have a nice, goodly amount there. The St. Peter situation, whether it's the security hospital or the sexual offender facility, I mean, this has been around for years and years and years, and we've, if you will, kicked the can down the road. Right or wrong, good or bad, this is not an issue that's going to go away. And I think as we have now this in our bonding bill, maybe hopefully we won't take too many trips back to St. Peter in the near future and look once again at the needs down there. The civic centers, again, 7, 8 years in many cases. These have been around and for all kinds of reasons not been done, but finally, at least civic centers in 3 major regional centers across Minnesota will be completed. And then you speak, Senator Stump, about housing, and this is a huge amount of money, and we can agree or not agree with respect to housing, but I can tell you at the end of the day, economic development is part and parcel to all this. If businesses don't have employees that are able to find housing, they don't have workers. And without workers, of course, our businesses don't strive. Obviously, if I had any one provision that's not in this bill, it would be sprinklers. And I say that with genuine sincerity. I think as we think about the sprinkler provision, which had bipartisan support, 50 votes in this body on one occasion, 47 on the other, and we voted other times as well with equally strong votes. It's not there. I think the will of this legislature, whether it's House or Senate, say we ought not require sprinklers in homes. And the governor thought otherwise, and I guess this time he prevailed. But the sprinkler debate will be back. It will not go away until, in fact, we do resolve this. I think in the favor of the people that want to buy houses, want to build houses, and don't want to pay for sprinkler systems. They'd much rather have a lower-priced house. This someone had said the other day, this is the Unaffordable House Act. We all want affordable housing. Well, we're making them, generally speaking, more or less affordable by the fact that going forward, at least the larger homes are going to require sprinklers, and maybe ultimately even the smaller ones, as the Department of Labor and Industry has suggested to us. So, Senator Stump, thank you for your work. I think you did a magnificent job of taking a lot of pressures, putting them together, and bringing a bill to us on the floor today, and I compliment you for your work and for your kindness, your welcoming spirit throughout all of this. We do appreciate it. We enjoy working with you, Senator Stump.
Senator Tomassoni.
Thank you, Madam President. And, I normally don't get up to do this, but I think that Senator Stump definitely needs to be thanked, and we have to appreciate the job he's done on this bill. If, as a member of the bonding committee, if you travel around the state with the bonding committee and you see what a vast state this is and what all the diverse needs there are in this state, you find out why a bonding bill is so important and why it's very important for us to pass a bonding bill. Whether you go down to southwestern Minnesota where they need a water system, or any one of the projects that are in this bill, you find out that the state of Minnesota has a lot of different needs, and it's incumbent upon us to provide some money to fix and to provide money for these needs. And Senator Stump did an excellent job in trying to figure out exactly how to parse out $1 billion when there were $5 or $6 billion in requests, and to put a bonding bill together that meets the needs across the entire state the way that this was done, without enough resources available to do the job, deserves some accolades. And so I just am thankful for how this bill came out, and quite frankly, there should be 67 green votes here, members.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, I rise in support of this bonding bill. As a member of the bonding committee, it was a great privilege to learn about all the projects throughout this state that were of great value and of great necessity. And what I appreciate was the organization and the thoughtfulness that went into those bonding tours and the information that we learned. I commend Senator Stump for really what was two things. One, we're talking about the bonding bill now, but next we'll be talking about the cash bill. And that is a different dilemma, or actually an opportunity to do both bonding and both cash. And while my good colleague from Olmsted County as well visited much about some of the important projects in this bonding bill, let me just add a couple other thoughts to that. I notice balance in this bonding bill. I notice balance in geography and in the types of projects that are covered. I also notice that, of course, as often in life, nearly always, we need to set priorities. There were $4 billion of requests, and we needed to set priorities in how to fund those. And there's balance as well between this bonding bill and the cash bill. In the bonding bill particularly, I look at the things like capital restoration, something that many of us have worked on here for years, ever since I came to this Capitol. So that's an essential piece, and I'm glad that we're finally going to be able to finish the funding for this beautiful building. And also, I'm glad to see the Chatfield Center for the Arts in the bonding. And then let me just mention on the cash side, as we get to that, certainly things like the Lewis and Clark Water and the Rochester Civic Center expansion. But the reason I bring them up together here is because while there is balance in these bills, there's also things that are that maybe I wouldn't have chosen to have in each of those bills. But overall, both of these bills reflect the balance that's needed in this state, and I appreciate the thoughtful work that went into putting these together.
Senator Stump.
Thank you, Madam President. It is a little sad to fund some of these projects because we know we won't be able to go back to the welcoming communities across the state, but I'm sure we'll find some new ones. But I want to take this opportunity. I appreciate all the kind words that you mentioned about the bill and what you think of it. But I want to thank the people behind the scenes for just a second who kept us on track and provided the transportation and the schedules and literally hundreds and hundreds of phone calls to organize all this, and then also to the paperwork and the everything going up to getting it to where it is. We have Dave Jensen, who's our fiscal analyst, and he kind of served double duty during this very compressed session. And we have Stephanie James, who's our counsel, and appreciate all the ideas, working through some tough issues and coming up with creative solutions. And then, of course, we have our number one scheduler and committee administrator, Logan O'Grady, and of course Jerry Wenzel, who keeps us all on track. So thank you very much, and I think all from the Senate, we appreciate all the hours and numerous days that you've put in on this. So thank you. And hopefully I can ask for your support, and that this bill becomes law and becomes part of your meeting some of your community's needs, so across the state.
Senator Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam President. And members, I would like to say I understand this is not easy to do. It would not be something I want to do, putting this together. Very challenging, so I understand that part of it. I must say, though, couple points. One is I always look at priorities, and we have a dam that's fallen apart, and several dams across the state are falling apart. I know we've got money in here for a couple of them, but $4 million for a dam to get replaced on a lake. But we can't find that in the bill. We were able to find members money for a lot of money for Minneapolis St. Paul. A lot of money in this bill for Minneapolis St. Paul, but we couldn't find a little bit of money for a couple of dams to finish that project. We're talking $4 or $5 million more dollars. But Minneapolis St. Paul get Nicollet Mall. The other thing is roads. We talk about roads, bridges, infrastructure. And after seeing this bonding bill, I know there's some money in here for roads, but if my math is right, it's just over $87 million in cash and bonding for roads. That didn't seem like a priority for roads and bridges to me. So for the record, thank you for the work. It's not easy, but it is somewhat disappointing that we couldn't find a little money to take care of critical things like dams and those priorities like roads. It's just not enough money in here for roads and bridges and the critical infrastructure across the state. Thank you again.
Senator Ortman.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm wondering if Senator Stump will yield.
Senator Stump will yield. Senator Ortman.
Thank you, Madam President. Senator Stump, I am so grateful at your kindness and your welcoming to the folks from Watertown that were looking for funds for their bridge, matching funds for a bridge that's set to begin work in June of this year, next month, if they can find the matching funds from the state. And it wasn't clear to me in these bills whether or not that $800,000 needed by the city of Watertown is available for that purpose within that time frame. And I'm wondering if Senator Stump will let me know what does Watertown's future look like with respect to their requests?
Senator Stump.
Thank you, Madam President and Senator Ortman. And I appreciate your constituents coming in too. There's $33 million in the bill for bridges, and the one bridge that has been identified here is 11 million, so it leaves about $22 million bridges. And I believe in the discussion that we had with both in committee and then also privately, I think your proposal was pretty much ready to go and right at the top. So I think it has very good chance of being funded. The way that MnDOT operates is that as projects, they materialize or they happen over time. And I think in the case of the bridge that you're talking about, I think my understanding is it got the approval and it's all set to go. So I would hope that MnDOT will take some of this money. I don't know the exact dollar amount on the bridge that you're requesting, but I think there's adequate money to cover that.
Senator Ortman.
Madam President, I appreciate that. It's a critical need. It was intended to be funded in 2012, and the Watertown Bridge has not been able to be begun because we were waiting for the state matching funds. I'm hopeful that Watertown's project will be put to the top of the list in applications for these funds once this bill is approved. I am hoping that Senator Stump will yield again. I'm hoping, Madam President, that he will tell us what happened with the Safe Routes to Schools funding. That funding began with $6 million, I believe, in this bonding proposal. And I'm wondering why now we're looking at a bonding bill with $852 million worth of borrowing and projects, but only $1 million for the Safe Routes to Schools.
Senator Stump.
Thank you, Madam President and Senator Ortman. I believe the Senate had $2 million when their bill was before this body. Exactly when that happened, I'm not sure. There was numerous negotiations going on right up until late last night. And so I think I actually think that this change occurred within the last, I'd say, several days anyway, but I can't tell you exactly, Senator Ortman, when that occurred. But there was also some additional money for, I believe, the planning for Safe Routes to Schools in the supplemental budget bill. And I don't know if that's, I haven't had a chance to go through that bill. Maybe Senator Dibble, would you know what's in the other bill?
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, at one time, the Senate Transportation Supplemental Finance Budget Bill had quite a bit of general fund one-time dollars to allocate, and the proposal that we had prepared did include $6 million in capital for Safe Routes to School grants throughout the state. That part of the Senate supplemental budget bill, the one-time general fund appropriation, was taken from the transportation bill and put into a separate bill and then referred to the Capital Investments Committee.
Senator Sharon. Oh, Senator Ortman.
Thank you, Madam President. I was very concerned about the Safe Routes to Schools funding. It was a very important part of this bonding bill. If we are going to spend this much money and authorize this much money in borrowing, Madam President and members, the Safe Routes to Schools fund deserved more than $1 million. And let me tell members why. In 2013, the Safe Routes to Schools program received more than 100 applications from schools all across the state of Minnesota. with students who walk to school needing a safe route to school. In my community, on Highway 5 and 212, out in Norwood, Young America, folks are crossing a very dangerous intersection to get to school. And we know we have now imposed on more families to say if you live within a certain distance of the school, you need to walk. That's why Safe Routes to Schools funding deserved more than $1 million, because those 100 applications that the department received in 2013 requested $16 million in funding. The schools across our state asked for $16 million to help our kids get to school safe. And they awarded only $3.5 million to 13 projects. The project alone in Norwood Young America needs $2 million to properly fund the Safe Route to School. That should have been a high priority in this bill. And I have to say, despite all the great work that I think deserves our congratulations and our thanks for Senator Stumpf, I think the committee and leadership here, the governor, should have done better when it came to funding Safe Routes to Schools. And I have to ask, where are your priorities? Where are the priorities in a bill that funds $850 million in projects, but not for our school kids? When I look at what this bonding bill does fund, I really have to question the priorities. I see $5 million for a Chatfield Center for the Arts and Potter Auditorium remodeling. I see $7 million for the Duluth North Shore Theater renovation. There's almost $4 million, which could pay for twice this project in Norwood Young America, the Grand Rapids Regional Performing Arts Center renovations. St. Paul did extremely well. St. Paul gets $14 million for the Children's Museum renovation, $9 million for the Public Media Commons, $4 million for the Ordway for the Performing Arts, $5 million for the Palace Theater renovation, but we can't find $2 million to pay for Safe Routes to Schools in Norwood Young America, or the other $13 million in projects that are waiting for schools, requests from schools all across the state of Minnesota. But it goes on, we've got Minneapolis Parks and Recreation requests that are funded in here for more than what's needed for a safe route to school. I have to question the priorities here of a bill that spends this much, but can't find more than $1 million in borrowing for safe routes to schools.
Senator Sharon.
Thank you. I rise in support of this bill. I'm very appreciative of a number of priorities that were established this year. In particular, I find that the commitment to housing by the bonding committee and by this legislature is incredibly important to the future economic capacity of our communities to draw businesses who might not otherwise be there if they can't find appropriate housing for the employees they will need. This is a critical economic development component of this bill, and I'm going to be very proud to talk about this as we leave and talk to our communities. We do focus a great deal on the large components of the bill, like the $100 million that is spent in housing, or the over $50 million at the State Regional Treatment Center in St. Peter. I do want to speak to that in particular because there has been this request in front of the legislature for a long time. It's difficult for us sometimes to expend our resources on things that aren't flashy or shiny, but the care of the mentally ill and the care of those that we have that are at the most serious place in their lives is very important. And because of the extreme difficulties they have in managing their behavior, they are needing to be in an environment where they can be safe, and that the people who work with them can be safe when they provide them care. So I'm so appreciative that this finally has been funded to make the improvements in this facility that allow the environment to be improved in a way that we can attack what has been a horrific increase in patient and staff injury. And in addition, I know that Senator Stumpf worked very hard to keep the money in this bonding bill for the improvements to the Minnesota Sex Offenders Program. And I know that, that this was a struggle, sometimes not supported by the House, but that the Senate prevailed in this fashion because we have, as we did with passing legislation to address the court's ruling about how we are dealing with sex offenders, we continue as a body to say that this is important, and that even though it is something that may not be popular in the public, we have a responsibility to respond to it. But I really wanted to speak about something quite small, and that is a project that is really important in the central part of the state of Minnesota, in communities that rarely are in front of us asking for resources. And that relates to a railroad improvement that runs through Sibley County that Senator Cohen and Senator Dames and I are very committed to. It's a small request that comes to us, but it is the upgrade of a rail that will allow those communities who are very small, who struggle to just keep their small main streets open, to have an economic development infrastructure necessary for the agri-based businesses that will develop in those communities, because we admit that we need to make commitments to rail in other places of the state, in these small communities. So I'm very appreciative that at least a component of that was addressed in this bonding bill, and I'm hoping that in the future that we will help these communities along that rail line complete the upgrade to this particular small rail project. And then finally, I heard Senator Stump say that he was feeling some feeling of sadness or loss about not going back to visit some of these projects year after bonding year. But I suspect that there are many in this body that are grateful that they will not have to be hearing from me again about the Mankato Civic Center and Arena, which is a project that I have been absolutely frustrated about its inability to be funded when every other major facility of its nature has been funded in this state. So I'm very appreciative, and I'm certain that everybody here in this body will be appreciative that I am able to go back to my community and celebrate this inclusion in the bonding bill. Thank you.
Senator Bonoff.
Madam President, first I do have to say, Senator Sharon, I am relieved that we will no longer be hearing about the Mankato Civic Center. But I do acknowledge, Senator Sharon, how effective you have represented the needs of your community in that region, because it isn't just your community, but in fact, it is the broader region. And so I too want to thank Senator Stump for what is before us as we look at this bonding bill, and in particular want to thank Senator Stump for the strong commitment that the Senate made towards higher education, and that the conferees on the bonding conference committee, or in those discussions, were able to come through with, because we had, in my opinion, the strongest approach to funding infrastructure for higher education. We had proposed the greatest amount of HEAPR dollars, and HEAPR dollars aren't sexy. They aren't a new building. They aren't something, you know, that's got bells and whistles on it, but it really is our ability to make certain that what we have lasts for not just today, but the next century. And so President Kaler and Chancellor Rosenstone were most grateful for our approach to looking at this. In addition, we found ourselves in a quandary when because of the commitment to the Bell Museum, we weren't able to fulfill as much of the Senate's and University of Minnesota's intentions on individual projects once we went beyond HEAPR, and due to some creative, flexible thinking on behalf of many, we're funding the University of Minnesota itself is funding the Bell Museum, and we're carrying the debt service in our finance bill so that we could, in fact, fund more projects. We went in the order of each of our institutions' priorities, which I think is important, with, you know, minor exceptions, and we'd rather not have to go around any exceptions. But there was one exception that I took myself that I also want to highlight, and that is we put a small amount of money in the University of Minnesota's allocation for the design for the science building at Duluth. And I want to highlight that because I think UMD has a real opportunity to become a leader in the STEM fields. You know, there they are sitting in that beautiful, beautiful place with all of the science activity, the mining activity around them. And so being able to support UMD's vision in fulfilling the opportunity that in the sciences can provide in attracting the best and brightest students and faculty is something that I'm proud we're able to do today. And then finally, just a thank you to Senator Stump for investing in the St. David's Center, because St. David's is a center which provides intervention services for young children with disabilities. They also provide services to all young children, but in particular, they're known for really being a model of providing extraordinary services to the youngest learners with disabilities in such a way that by the time those kids come to kindergarten, they're often no longer in need of our services. And so being able to support St. David's so that they can continue to train others around this state and reach out to a much broader community, making a difference to each and every little one, is something that I'm also grateful to be able to support today.
Is there any more discussion? Senator Sieben.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd just like to echo the thanks to Senator Stump for really putting together a tremendous bill that makes wise investments all across the state of Minnesota. I genuinely appreciate his hard work and the committee's dedication throughout the fall and winter. I'd also like to acknowledge the work that Senator Scalzi did as the vice chair of the bonding committee. Her advocacy for projects throughout the state, and especially in the East Metro side of the Twin Cities, is appreciated. I just want to express a short bit of disappointment. Senator Stump and the committee put a full $2 million into a project in Washington County for the Hastings Trail. Members, this project will connect a trail that is just north of the newly completed Hastings Bridge up Hollywood Hill, we call it locally, and is an important link for linking the trails in that area of the state. It's my understanding that late last night in negotiations with the other bodies, Minority Caucus, my local House member agreed that some of that money could go to a different section of the state, despite Washington County's objections to that. So that is personally disappointing to me that now there's only $1.6 million going towards that local project instead of the $2 million. And again, I'd like to reiterate my thanks to Senator Stump for advocating for the $2 million, which was in the House bill and was in the Senate bill earlier and was in both bills all the way up until late last night. And that's the way it works out, but I just want to express my disappointment on behalf of my constituents that the full $2 million is not in there. So, but again, overall, I think that this is a great bill, and I am looking forward to seeing a lot of green votes on the board for it.
Is there any more discussion? The Secretary will give House File 2490 its third reading.
House File number 2490, a bill for an act relating to capital investment, authorizing spending to acquire and better public land and buildings and other improvements of a capital nature.
Secretary will take the roll.
Well, that's right. There's never anything for no count in these bills. That's exactly right. That's
All members having voted? Oh. All members having voted, the secretary will close the roll. There being 47 ayes and 17 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Senator Stump.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that number 66 on general orders be stricken and laid on the table.
That is Senate File 2605.
That's correct.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Bach.
Madam President, I move House File 1068 be taken from the table.
On that motion, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Bach.
Madam President, I move an urgency be declared within the meaning of Article 4, Section 19 of the Constitution of Minnesota with respect to House File 1068, and that the rules of the Senate be so far suspended as to give House File 1068 its second and third reading and place it on its final passage.
On that motion, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Senator Stump. The bill, House File 1068, will be given its second reading.
Thank you.
Senator Stump.
Thank you, Madam President and members. As I mentioned earlier, that this is the cash portion of the bonding process this year, and the spreadsheet we'll use is the same one that we used before, and you'll notice that the third column from the right on that spreadsheet is at top is labeled cash. And so what we'll do is we'll go down that list or that column, and as you see, there's all of higher education is not included in the cash. That was all bonding. So on the second page, you'll see on a couple of projects under natural resources was included. The flood mitigation had $7.5 million in cash. A project down in south central Minnesota, I believe by Albert Lee, has a project, Fountain Lake. That was $7.5 million in cash. The Department of Agriculture has a request in for some lab equipment, And also, there was a request for, I believe that was it. That was cash. The Department of Administration had a portion of that capital restoration, or I think that's the asset preservation, was $1 million in cash. Under the Amateur Sports Commission, we have $1.5 million for the Mighty Ducks. That was cash. A small amount for a public safety center in the community of Cyrus was cash. And under transportation, you'll see much more significant amounts of dollars for both local roads and local bridges, as well as the safe routes to school. Those are going to be funded by cash. And under Veterans Affairs, there was one project in Edina, the Veterans Memorial, which is funded by cash, and the intake portion of the St. Cloud Correctional Facility. That's the first phase of a two-phase project. That's going to be funded by cash. And under economic development, employment and economic development, you'll see that list, a number of projects as we go down the list. Some of them are innovative business development infrastructure, the Cosmos, or the North Shore Theater, the Duluth Wade Stadium, the Hermantown Regional Health Center, the Lake Superior Water Pipeline, the Mankato Civic Center, the Rochester Civic Center, the Sandstone Business Park Development, the Spirit Mountain Water Design, Water Transport is in cash, St. Cloud Convention Center, the St. Paul Children's Museum is approximately about half cash and half bonding. And on the next page, the Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation Board, which has the Giants Ridge, that's being funded with cash, and the Lewis and Clark portion of the first phase that the state's funding is in cash. Oslo, the water main and sewer is in cash, and the historic and local preservation grants under the Minnesota Historical Society is in cash. And that all adds up to $198,748,000. And I believe the difference is the debt service? And the difference between the 200 and the 198 is the debt service on that, that amount. So members, if I have confused you, you could refer to the House File 1068. The language spells out the descriptions of those projects. And I think I could just stand for some questions, and if members have, and see if there are any.
Discussion on House File 1068. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to stand and make some comments about the Lewis and Clark Rural Water Project that has been included here. Certainly, just for a little background, it is in 1991 that as a city council member of Laverne, I voted for the city of Laverne to become a part of this project. And as I went through from 93 through the year 2000 as mayor, testifying in Washington, D.C., seeing this project approved, and in the early 2000s, seeing the legislature come forward with the money to fund the state share at that time, and the local entities providing the money for their share, I never really expected to have to deal with this project again. And imagine my surprise late last year when I became aware that indeed I was going to deal with this project once more due to the failure of the federal government to live up to their obligations. But I do wish to take this opportunity to thank Senator Stump for his gracious listening and the committee's input into this whole process. We have this money, $22 million in cash. The balance, we have an opportunity for financing, and I want to thank the efforts of Senator Skoye and Senator Rest, as well as Senator Gazelka, as my caucus's member of the conference committee, and thank them for taking us down the road and getting us to this point. I also wish to thank the members of my caucus. I understand that there are members of my caucus who have some issues with bonding bills and with some of the projects that are included in them. And yet they have time and time again stood up for this project, recognizing that it is indeed a priority project, bringing water to the people of Southwest Minnesota. And wherever they could, they stood up, defended this project, promoted this project, and I wish to take this opportunity as their fellow caucus member to thank them for that, and encourage everyone to vote for this project, and on behalf of the people of Southwest Minnesota, to offer their thanks as well.
Further discussion on House File 1068. None. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File number 1068, a bill for an act relating to capital investment, appropriating money for capital improvement projects.
Secretary will take the roll. All senators having voted, desire to vote. Secretary will close the roll. There's being 44 ayes, 19 nays. The bill is passed and its title agreed to. Senators